Now that the resurrection of Buu stopped before Babidi could reach his goal, the Earth was returned to a time of peace. Regardless, since Shin offered to train Roshi, and he convinced Shin to train Gohan and Videl as well, they all went to the sacred world of the Kai together. After they arrived, and before they could start their training, Kibito gave them clothing like a Supreme Kai's. Anyway, they would eventually arrive at a sword in the mountains, since Shin planned for that to be their first test. Videl would give it a shot first, but since she doesn't know the Kaioken or anything, she wouldn't be able to pull it out in just her base form. Gohan tried to pull it out next, but in his base form, it wouldn't budge. But when he turns into a Super Saiyan, he manages to pull it out of the mountain. However, he quickly reverts to his base form, though he was having trouble swinging it in that form. When Kibito tells him he doesn't know how to wield it, Gohan lets him try to lift the sword to show him how to wield it, but Kibito can't even lift it off the ground. Regardless, the three would take turns training with the sword, though with Gohan knowing Super Saiyan and Roshi knowing the Kaioken, they had an easier time with lifting the sword than Videl did. Roshi would have tried to teach her the Kaioken, but she refused to learn it at first, and she wanted to prove she could do it in her own way. So that if she managed to lift it, she would let Roshi teach her the Kaioken. So, she never gave up on trying. She kept training her strength with Shin and Kibito until she was able to lift the sword on her own. After she managed to lift the sword, they kept training with it until Gohan no longer had to use Super Saiyan to lift it, and Roshi didn't have to use the Kaioken to lift it. Out of the three of them, ironically it was Videl who took to using the sword the most, since Gohan and Roshi don't really fight with weapons, while Videl was more open to learning how to use them. Though one day, while Gohan was training with the sword, Shin got the idea to test the sword's strength. He then materializes a block of catching and throws it at Gohan, that when he tries to use the sword to cut it in half, the sword breaks. This shocked Shin and Kibito, so they didn't think it could break, but out of the sword popped the old Kai. He would reveal who he was and mention that he was sealed in the sword by someone, though he claims they were sealed in it because of his special power. So, they asked him what this power was, and he explained how he could draw out someone's dormant potential. However, since there are three of them training with Shin, it would take longer to draw out their dormant potential. We don't know if he can unlock multiple people's potential at the same time, so I'm going to assume he can only unlock one person's potential at a time. He would start with unlocking Gohan's potential, so Gohan had to sit down in front of the old Kai, since he couldn't move during the ritual. While Gohan was going through the ritual, this gave Roshi the time to start teaching Videl the Kaioken. Like with flying, it would take a bit to get the hang of it, but she would show brief signs of being able to use it early on. By the time the ritual was done, she hadn't completely managed to use it, so when Roshi went to get his potential unlocked, she kept practicing it on her own. After giving her some last minute advice, Roshi sat down with the old Kai as he began the process of unlocking Roshi's dormant potential. While he was going through the ritual, Videl continued to practice using the Kaioken, while Gohan would train with her. Another thing to potentially mention about Videl's training is that since she was doing so well with the Z-Sword, and she enjoyed training with it, she might ask Shin about having another sword made for her to use. While we do know that it was Beerus who sealed the old Kai in the Z-Sword, we don't know if he made the Z-Sword or obtained it from someone. Regardless, it would take years for Shin to be able to meet up with him to get another Z-Sword, since he isn't due to wake up until years from now, which he would let her know that it could take years to get another one, but the moment he does receive one, he will give it to her. Regardless, after Roshi finished having his potential unlocked, Videl would go sit with the old Kai to have her dormant potential unlocked. Of course, while she was going through the ritual, Gohan and Roshi would train together. Eventually, after her potential is unlocked, they would all thank the old Kai for unlocking their potential. Though the three of them would continue to train with Shin and Kibito, at least until Videl managed to learn the Kaioken. After she does, they would thank Shin and Kibito for training them, as Roshi then uses the Kai to transport himself, Gohan, and Videl back to Earth. Now, my next decision is probably one people aren't going to be happy with, but I've decided not to cover Dragon Ball Super in this timeline. There are two reasons I've done this, with the first reason being that I wanted this timeline to focus more on the humans. The Dragon Ball Super focuses more on the Saiyans. Speaking of the Saiyans, that brings me to the second reason why, which is that in Battle of Gods there wouldn't be enough pure-hearted Saiyans to do the ritual. Sure, they would have 6 Saiyans if Tarble, Broly, and Paragus were gathered, but Paragus isn't pure-hearted and Beerus isn't patient enough to wait for him to become pure of heart. We also have no idea if Tarble is pure-hearted, since we never see him, and he's only mentioned in some of the movies. Even if the revelation of Videl being pregnant still happened, there's the possibility that they're down one Saiyan, depending on if Tarble is pure-hearted or not. So, I decided to skip Dragon Ball Super. Since the Battle of Gods did happen, it would end badly for the heroes. I'm still thinking about covering one thing from Dragon Ball Super though, since it mostly has to do with the humans. Regardless, after Roshi, Gohan, and Videl arrive on Earth, they would continue their training. Videl would train with Roshi some more, so that she could learn to master the Kaioken like he did. Though after she does master it, so she has the ultimate form as well. In her free time she might try to combine the Kaioken with her ultimate form. Now if that would work, well it's hard to say for sure, but I don't see why it couldn't. Another thing to mention is that 4 years later, Shin would have kept his promise with Videl, since Beerus woke up at this time. So, he used the Kai to go to Beerus' planet, as he even asked Beerus about getting a new Z-Sword. Of course, knowing these two, there would probably be some amount of bickering between them. though at the end of the day, Beerus will likely relent and have Whis use his staff to materialize a new Z-sword. This time, however, Whis will likely materialize a better sword than the old one, so that it couldn't break as easily. After receiving the sword, Shin would head back to Earth with it, where he would give it to Videl. Of course, she would thank him for this, as she promises they won't break it this time. Shin then returned to the sacred world of the Kai, while Videl and the others continued to train on Earth. Even though they were in a time of peace, they would try not to slack on their training, though it's possible Gohan might start to slack on his training eventually, especially after he gets more job opportunities related to being a scholar. So, while he would be stronger than he normally is at the time of the superhero movie happening, he likely would have started to slack on training since the Earth was in a time of peace and he was following his dream of being a scholar. Though Videl would get him to train with her every now and again, it wasn't enough to keep him from being rusty. Regardless, the Earth is in a time of peace again, so the heroes would be able to return to their normal daily lives, at least for now.